Here. Ba, 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 ba. Uh-oh. Hold 1 second, please. We're having video technical difficulties. Nothing that we can't navigate through. Nothing that won't be fixed in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bam! There we go. I just got to straighten it up. And there it goes again. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Good Morning Grief Devotion. Oh, here we go again. It's your boy, Pastor Corey Allen Duncan Sr. They don't want us to be great today. We are so grateful and thankful to have this wonderful opportunity to come to you today, lead you in a very special way in today's Good Morning Grief Devotion. Hey, this is the daily grief devotion that is strategically designed to help you to navigate through your grief one day at a time. What is grief? I'm so glad you asked. Grief, my brothers and sisters, it is the natural, normal, and necessary response to loss, change, and transition that results in the expressions of feelings and emotions. That grief is what you feel on the inside. Mourning is how you express it on the outside. Therefore, we don't suppress it, but we express it. We don't ignore it, but we explore it. We don't conceal it, but we reveal it. We don't lock it up, but we let it out. And that's why we shout good morning, because mourning is a good thing. And I thank y'all for being here on today as we dive in today's Good Morning Grief Devotion. Today, my brothers and sisters, is day 300. It's day 300. Today, we're going to talk about I cannot think through my grief. I cannot think through my grief. I cannot think through my grief. Let's talk about it. While I'm tempted to want to think about my grief in my head, I must allow it to descend into my heart. While I'm tempted to want to think about my grief in my head, I must allow it to descend into my heart. If I insulate myself from feeling by always thinking, guess what? I will shut down. One of the things that we do when it comes to this grief journey, there's two things that happens. We think and we feel. We think and we feel. We think and we feel. Some of us try to insulate ourselves from feeling by always thinking. Some of us, we want to be cognitive and not emotional. And there is a place and time, not now, where being cognitive and not emotional is important. You got to make decisions, you got to be rational, all of that. But when it comes to grief, you cannot erase the emotional by focusing on the cognitive. You cannot be so focused on thinking. You're trying to think and rationalize and all of this stuff so that you don't have to feel. Give yourself permission to feel. That's the one thing we struggle with doing because feeling can be painful, right? But that's the only way through it. The only way through it is through it. The only way to get through it is to go through it, right? And so we give ourselves permission to feel. Don't try to think so much that you take away the possibility or the opportunity for you to feel what you need to feel. You can't be so cerebral. You can't be so in your head that you don't navigate through this thing with your heart, right? And we will. We'll try to rationalize. We'll try to think. We'll try to make it make sense, right? And all of this is a defense mechanism to get us or to shield us or to insulate us from feeling what we need to feel. Yeah, the thing about grief is this: it's going to be with you. It's a part of you. It's a part of you. It's going to be with you. And as you navigate through and it's okay. It's okay. The longer you put it off, right? The longer it's going to take for you to start the journey. We don't say get over. I'm even start to, just in a lot of stuff I've been reading, even start to, heal. We use the word heal all the time. And I don't know. I'm thinking about, I'm studying some more. But we may even take that away because if we say it's the natural, normal, and necessary response, right, then healing would imply like that something is wrong. And really it's natural, it's normal, and it's necessary. It's just something that we have to navigate through. So I'm still thinking that through, but it's something that we have to navigate through. And you give yourself permission. You give yourself permission to feel and to navigate through what you're feeling as it relates to your grief. And you're going to always feel something that's going to be with you, right? 5 years down the line, it's going to be with you. 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, guess what? And it may not feel as intense, but it's still going to be there. Because you'll say, oh, they would have been, my sister, she would have been 50 years old. Like, wow. She was born in 74. It's 2024. Her birthday is coming up, November 24th. She would have been 50. We would have been throwing a 50. I wonder what she would have been. I wonder what my nieces and nephews would have looked like. I wonder where she would be in the educational system at this time. Right? It's one of them things where you'll always wonder that it'll be with you. And you give yourself permission to feel. You give yourself permission to feel that. Give yourself permission to feel. Don't try, when I say, we don't ignore, we explore. Don't try to ignore by trying to think and not feel. Give yourself permission to do just that. If I insulate myself from feeling by always thinking, guess what? I'll shut down. I have to come to the realization that it is in being open to my feelings that I discover renewed meaning and purpose in my life. Being open to my feelings, I will discover renewed meaning and purpose in my life. Be open to your feelings and learn how to process what you're feeling. Go through the process of processing, right? What you're feeling as you navigate through the season of grief. Here's the final thought, y'all. I must allow my grief to go from my head to my heart. Allow your grief to go from your head. I know you're trying to rationalize. I know where he wouldn't have had a heart attack. I told him stop eating all that pork and all this stuff and his high blood pressure. And it's just that job. That job just got on him so bad, and there's so many people that did that. So we want to think that we don't want to feel. We just want to think all of this stuff instead of giving ourselves permission to feel what we need to feel. Feel the loss, feel the pain, feel the hurt, feel the regret. Feel it. Feel it, feel it, feel it. You got to feel it. So give yourself permission to do that. Today is day 300. I cannot think through my grief. You sure can't. You can't think through it. You got to give yourself permission to feel. Good morning. If y'all got questions, drop them. Good morning, Kelly Bivens. My emotions were paralyzed for 2 decades after my daddy died. Slowly, I'm letting the emotions in. That's due in large part to you. Oh, that's so awesome. Thank you so very much for sharing this. Yes. And I always say, so what happens is, whether we paralyze or whether we pause, whether we don't give ourselves permission to feel, so we suppress, we don't express, we ignore, we don't explore, we conceal it, we don't reveal it. So we stay stuck, right? We stay stuck, stalled, and stagnant because it's like a trip. We never unpacked it. It's like if you go on a trip, you got a suitcase and you come home. Eventually, what are you going to do? You're going to unpack the contents that's in the suitcase, right? You're going to open it up. You're going to start to unpack stuff, and you're going to put things in their proper place, right? The thing when it comes to grief, because we suppress, we don't express, we never want to unpack the suitcase. We never give ourselves permission to open it up. Right? Open yourself up emotionally, become vulnerable, and start to unpack this suitcase. Unpack your feelings. Unpack the experience. Unpack it. Unpack. Me and Corey, we were picking up a pizza the other day, and there was a guy who's coming out of the pizza place when my son was coming out, and he was going on a little rant. He was going on a little rant as he was walking out the door, and he says, all my life. He says, all my life he's been, and it was a Caucasian fella. He says, all of my life He's been a racist narcissist. He was talking about his father. So all of my life he's been a racist narcissist, and now the last 2 years he wants to be different in it, and just expect us to ignore, the last 35 years of our life. And he was going off, and his father was in the restaurant, and it was coming out with another young girl. I don't know if it was a daughter or granddaughter or what. So he was coming out, and so then the fella, he was coming back towards the door, and he was looking at us, and he was just like, "Yeah, man, I just don't get it. Like all of my life, he's been a racist, he's been narcissistic, and now the last 2 years, he expects me just to erase the last 35 years as if it never happened, and I'm sick of it." And so by this time, the father, who was on the cane, was coming to the door with the other girl, and they was outside, and we were pulling off, and I wanted to stop and be nosy and hear the conversation, but he was going off. He was going off on the father, and I don't know, I don't know the full background, but just from the pieces of what I gathered, this son was frustrated because his father, he's according to him, said he's been racist and narcissistic he said for like 35 years, and I don't know what happened the last 2 years that made him change. I don't know if he was just an old man trying to get into heaven. I don't know if he met Jesus Christ and turned his life around. I have no idea. But the son's gripe was he said he expects me to forget, 35 years, right? Obviously, there was some pain. Obviously, there was some damage. Obviously, there were some things that transpired that they did not have the opportunity to unpack, right? And so this was the source, the nature of the source of the son's frustration, because whatever happened, he didn't get an opportunity to unpack any of that. And really, he was doing it in that parking lot, expressing how he felt, right? And I was telling my son, I'm like, son, I said, that's why you got to unpack your problems. Whatever he's feeling, he's got to get to a place to where he can with the father, and he's doing it now in an explosive type of manner. But you got to unpack that, right? Whatever you're feeling, right? You don't suppress, you express, right? You don't ignore, you explore. And so you got to get in a place, in a position where you start to unpack that suitcase. Dad, I love the fact that you've changed, or these 2 years, blah, blah, blah. But there's some stuff we got to unpack, right? Because for 35 years, it was, you know what I'm saying? So the same thing applies with grief, right? You got to unpack that suitcase. You got to unpack that suitcase. Y'all would think it was weird if you go on a trip. And I know some of us, right? We may not unpack it immediately, and it may lay in the floor for a week or two. But can you imagine, Kelly? I know you said 2 decades. Can you imagine having a trip, going on a trip and coming back, and allowing a suitcase to sit on the floor for 20 years? For 20 years, can you imagine allowing a suitcase to sit on the floor that you never unpacked for 20 years, right? And yet that's what a lot of us do with grief. We don't unpack. We don't unpack the situation. We don't unpack how we felt about the situation, how we're navigating through after the situation. We just keep on moving. We just go through life, right? We got to get to the place where we give ourselves permission to unpack the suitcase so that we can navigate what we're going through. Popcorn, I'll be eavesdropping. Exactly. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to meddle. I'm glad you got it. I'm glad the analogy stuck. It's so very important that we do that. And that's with big things and little things. It's with everything that we face. You got to unpack it. If you get divorced, if you get fired from a job, if you lose a pet, if you lose a loved one, if you lose a car, if you move out of the house you grew up in, you move into another house. Remember, grief is loss, change, and transition. If you retire, you got to unpack that suitcase. If you get married, you got to unpack that suitcase. If you graduate from college, it's not just the quote unquote bad things. It's any loss, change, and transition, right? You go from single to being married. Guess what? That's a transition. That's a change, and you got to have permission to talk. to talk about that. A lot of people may not understand. They be like, man, you met the love of your life. You should be happy. And they don't understand that there may be some sadness. There may be some reservation. There may be some hesitation. Why? Because it's a transition. People look forward to retiring. Oh, I finally get to retire. You still got to unpack that. And while everybody else say you should be happy, you ain't got to go to work tomorrow. It's a transition in life. You got to unpack that. You're going to feel some type of way. There's some feelings that you have. You got to unpack that, right? And so any loss, any change, any transition, you got to unpack it. You got a child going from 12 to 13, they're entering into their teenage years, unpack that. 19 to 20, you got to unpack that. 21, you got to unpack that, right? Whatever it is, you got any loss, any change, any transition, any loss, any change, any transition, right? Give yourself permission to unpack that suitcase. Thank y'all for joining us on today. No more questions. I appreciate it. I love when y'all ask questions. Just, I love to talk, but I love to speak specifically to your situations and circumstances. So good morning to everybody. Good morning, Tiffany McClendon. Thank you for joining us. Larry, thank y'all for joining us. I appreciate y'all. Look, we'll be back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank y'all for always being here. Remember, small steps lead to great distances. And keep on keeping on in Jesus' name. I love y'all with the love of the Lord. We out. Let's go.